some worship. I think this thing's off or something. Testing, testing. Ah, you're right. It is my pleasure.
Oh, okay. One sec. These were crumpled up in my glove box in my car since my last testimony a couple of weeks ago. All right. Well, I might as well just start at the beginning. My name is Josh, and I am a grateful believer in Jesus Christ. For those of you that don't know me, most of you do, Dan is my older brother, and to see him get his 15-year medallion is just, like my sister Jess says, my brothers are miracles. She's talking about Dan and I. I watched Dan do a lot of things wrong, but when he got into recovery, I also watched him do a lot of things right, and he was a great example for me because I didn't do things as clean as he did right from the beginning when it came to sobriety. So, my name is Josh. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ, and I struggle with addictions. And I'll start out with my childhood. I was your typical Iron Range boy. My dad worked in the mines. My mom was a stay-at-home mother until I was old enough to go to school, and then she also went to work. Both of my parents were great parents. My dad was a heck of a hard worker. He still is today. Dad was always working on something. He always bought broke down garbage that most people would throw in the dumpster, and he fixed it up nice, including his house that he just sold. And my mom, also very hard worker. She raised 5 kids. I'm the youngest of 5. And just when I think about it, I'm like, man, I go to work and I can barely keep track of 1 kid. I'm like, how does she go to work and keep track of 5 kids? But I can't complain at all about the way I grew up. The way I grew up was very good. There was never a shortage of anything. It always felt like we had enough. We never went hungry. We always had everything we needed. And we went to church. We were a church-going, Iron Range family. That's what we did. Sundays we went to Sunday service. Wednesdays was children's, whatever, youth group, all this. But I didn't really have a relationship with God. I knew about God, but I didn't know God. And I still didn't know God until the later years of my life. When I actually confessed with my mouth, I was about 13 years old. And the only reason I accepted Christ at 13 was basically out of fear. I went to this one play through youth group at this church in Hibbing, and it was called Heaven's Gates, Hell's Flames. And what it was it gave you a bunch of scenarios of different people, just regular people. Some were Christians, some were not. And it showed different ways of the way people died, and the believers got to go to heaven, and the non-believers went to hell. And whoever put on this play did a very good job of making hell a very creepy place, and a place that you did not want to go. And so at the end of that play, they did an altar call, and I think I was probably one of the first ones running down that aisle because I did not want to go to this place that they were describing. So I got in there, I got prayed over, and all right, then basically it was my fire escape. I still didn't have a relationship with God after that, but if I died, I was certain that I was going to go to heaven just because I confessed with my mouth. And I want to say, like, the way I grew up, my parents were Christians. I can't say I ever remember not believing that God was real. I always thought, I had more the mentality was, if he's real, or I'll believe in him. But if he's not, I don't know. There was some uncertainty there. There was never like a bold, I know, like I never knew for sure, like I do today. Growing up, I was never a real popular kid, but that didn't really bother me. I always felt like I never fit in with the really cool kids. I never fit in with the really smart kids. I wasn't a jock. Wasn't really a troublemaker. It was just kind of like I was my own breed, I guess you could say. I didn't I didn't fit in with a lot of different types of kids, but I had a group of friends where we were pretty tight. I grew up in Kitsville, very small town. If any of you guys are familiar with it, very tiny town. So everybody got along with everybody in this place. I mean, some of my friends were a heck of a lot younger than me, and some were much older than me. Dan's, I don't know how many years older than me, but some of Dan's friends were my friends, and vice versa. So, and a lot of the kids in that town were Kitsville kids were like up to no good. We were we weren't really known for being the greatest teenagers, but a lot of my friends, like I said, were younger than me, and they began using at really young ages. Some of them were like smoking and stuff at age 7, 8, and I didn't really have much interest in going that route at first because Dan, I watched him go down the wrong path, and I watched him constantly getting in trouble. He was constantly getting grounded. He was always getting yelled at by mom and dad, and I was like, yeah, it just wasn't anything I really wanted. But at the same time, I was the outcast because everybody else was doing it, you know. All the other kids are doing it. It wore on me after a while, and eventually I fell into it too. And it started out as just friends, or just fun, I mean. Cigarettes, weed, alcohol here and there. You know, it was playtime, basically. At around, I'd say about 14 or so. And at age 17, I was a sophomore in high school. I started dating this one gal. I thought my son was going to be here tonight, but he was at my last one. He probably didn't want to drive this far. At 17, I began dating this gal, and she became pregnant. And shortly after she found out she was pregnant, she moved out of state because she was 17. Her dad couldn't find work around here, lost his job, and had work down in Iowa, so they moved down to central Iowa. And we weren't dating for very long when she got pregnant. I think we were maybe 6, 8 months. And but when she left, it was just it wrecked me inside. You know, she was my girlfriend. She was pregnant with my kid, and then she was moving away. And the plan was for me to move down there when I turned 18, drop out of high school, and you know I had everything all figured out. Nothing worked out the way I wanted it to work out. For one, I mean, I dropped out of high school. I went into a really deep state of depression after she left. It was toward the end of the school year, or the end of the summer, toward the beginning of the school year. It would have been my 11th grade year. I remember going to the first like 3 days of 11th grade, and I told my mom, I'm like, you either gotta let me drop out, or I'm gonna drop out as soon as I turn 18 in a few months. And she agreed to let me drop out, and as long as I agreed to pursue getting my GED. And I did that. I wanted to do that. I knew I had to get it. You can't really get hardly anything without a GED these days. And so I dropped out, got the GED before I turned 18. I want to say it was only a matter of a month or two before I had that. And the girlfriend, when she moved away, we kept in contact over the phone, through letters, tried the whole long distance thing. But slowly, that kind of fell apart. We fell away. It was my fault, my doing 100%. I stopped answering the phone because I was getting more and more into using after she left. And like I said, I was pretty depressed. And it was around that time where I remember where the using actually became more of a coping mechanism to deal with the depression and deal with the hurt of her moving away. And like I said, I grew up in a very well-rounded house with well-rounded parents that did not approve of me smoking weed or drinking or doing any of that kind of stuff. So at age 18, me and my partner in crime, Dan, decided we were going to go get our own apartment. We moved out to the nice city of Eveleth, Minnesota when I was 18. And we were there for a grand total of, I think, about 6 months. And I was introduced to crystal meth when we lived there for the first time. And I know some of you around here have experimented with that stuff, and I don't have to say that that stuff deteriorates a man faster than any drug out there. It was I'm not a big dude. You know, picture me about 40 pounds lighter, skin hanging off, face hanging off. I'm ugly now, but think of it back then. No. And so, yeah, we got evicted from the apartment. I went back home to mom and dad, and I was thinking about this today on the way here. I don't remember what happened to Dan after that. Dan disappeared for a while. I don't know if he went to jail or what. But when I moved back home, I mean, I knew it was a problem. I knew the using was out of control. And my dad talked me into going to see this chemical dependency counselor. I'm like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, I'll go with you. So we sat down, we talked to this lady, and told her the whole story. I was still fairly young. What was I? Yeah, like 18, 19 at this time. And she said, well, since you're not, you're fairly young yet, just try going to NA meetings and, just hit up some meetings and try to get connected. Well, I went to NA for the first time by myself, and I was the youngest one there by far. Like, everybody there was twice my age, so I felt really uncomfortable. It would be like, they were probably my age, 36, and I walked in and I was 19, twice my age, and felt way out of place. I didn't talk, I just kind of sat there, couldn't wait for the meeting to get over, and I never went back to one for quite some time after that. I'm like, well, I kind of want to get sober, but I don't think these meetings are going to do a lick of good for me. Had the wrong attitude about it. So then I tried just getting by with busyness. I knew I had to do something, so I signed up for tech school at Mesabi Range in Eveleth, and I was going for maintenance mechanic. And I did fairly well in the first year. I was staying clean for the most part. I think I was dabbling in weed a little bit here and there, but nothing real major. And then by the second year, I was pretty much full swing back into smoking weed. I wouldn't consider myself I wasn't like an avid meth user. I was more like a binge user on it. For one, is it was really expensive. And two, every time I did it, I would binge on it, and then I would feel like such crap afterwards, where I'm like, I'm never gonna touch this stuff again. And I wouldn't for sometimes a month, sometimes 2, sometimes 3, but then I would go back to it and do the same thing, just that vicious cycle. But marijuana was always my weak spot, marijuana and alcohol, just because it was affordable and it was always available. So in the second year of school is when things started kind of slipping a little bit more. And when you're in your second year of this program, they had these opportunities for you to go out and work. Kind of like an apprenticeship deal. They'd call the instructors and say, hey, we need X amount of guys if you want to send a few. And I went there, and the instructors were even clear about, if you know you're dirty, do not sign up for work. I don't listen. I went, got pee tested. We can't say piss in church. Got pee tested the first day on the job. The second day, I remember getting a message on the answering machine saying you were THC level in your urine was way higher than it can be, and they told me you were blacklisted from Lakehead Constructors. And I don't know if any of you know who Lakehead is. They're one of the biggest contractors up here for like work in the mines, any kind of industrial work. And I just got basically told they're never going to hire me again. I pretty much threw my career out before I even got started for that portion of it. And when I went back to school, my instructors called me in their office. I knew it was coming. They actually went a few days before they talked to me. I think they just wanted me to sweat it out for a little while. Called me in, and one of them just started screaming at me, for about 10 minutes or so. And I deserved every yelling I was getting from them. I was screwing up a pretty good thing when they specifically told us not to go if we knew we were dirty. Really shortly after that, I dropped out of school again. Second time I dropped out. So I dropped out of high school, dropped out of tech school in the second year. Shortly after I dropped out of tech school, I remember going out one night, and I drank so much that it almost killed me. I actually woke up in the ICU, and the nurse asked me, she asked if I was trying to commit suicide. Because when I woke up, I said, how the heck did I make it through that? She goes, were you trying to kill yourself? And I stopped, and I had to really think. I remember saying, no, I wasn't trying to kill myself, but because suicide was never an option for me. It was never like, I couldn't kill myself, but it was at a point in life where I just didn't care anymore if I lived or died, where it was, the sky was the limit. I didn't care. And at this point, I didn't really have a place that I could call home. I was always welcome at my parents' house, but living the way that I wanted to live, my parents they would take me the way I was, that unconditional love, but I didn't want to go there basically out of shame, and because it was very hard for me to use when I was there. Had to do it outside, be sneaky about it. At least I thought I was being sneaky about it. My mom's not dumb. My mom's here, by the way. She's the lady in the green jacket in the back. And so I didn't really have a place to call home. I kind of couch hopped for a while. I lived down the road at my buddy Joe's house, which was about 3 blocks away from my parents' house. Yeah. I'd stop home once in a while to grab clothes and shower, whatever. I usually tried to plan it for when her and my dad weren't home. I'd kind of creep by or walk by. Okay, there's no car. It's time to go. Grab clothes, get clean, whatever, get some food. I'd disappear for days or maybe even a week at a time. Stop in once in a while. But this one particular early morning, I want to say it was like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, I was pretty strung out. I'd been up for a handful of days, and I stopped in to do my usual routine, grab some clothes and take a shower, and I left my jacket hanging on the chair in the kitchen. Come out of the shower, and my mom's there in the kitchen holding my, I don't remember what it was exactly, a bag of dope anyway. And she's there just in the kitchen sobbing, just crying out, like, asking me what she can do to help me. And I don't know about you guys. See, there's a lot of guys in here. My mom's a very important lady in my life. She was when I was younger. She still is today. Even today, like when I'm not having a very good day or a very good week, I go visit mom. Not to dump my problems on her, just because when I go visit mom, things are better just for a little bit. So when I saw mom there crying, begging her son, what can I do to help you? And this wasn't a very low-key conversation. It was more like, what can I do? And I'm like, I need to go away. I wanted to go to treatment. I'm like, send me to treatment. She goes, okay. I think she was probably happy just to hear those words come out of my mouth. Because that was step one. I was 22 years old, and I was saying, send me to treatment. Well, my parents looked into treatment, and it would have cost a small fortune to go. I don't remember what it was. It was upwards, or I think my dad said $20-some thousand. And this was a number of years ago. This was over 15 years ago. Something like that. Expensive, a lot of money. My parents would have went broke trying to get me clean. So what I did was I went with my dad to another chemical dependency counselor, and it was a fellow over in Virginia. His name was Pat Grayheck. He was a real popular guy, I guess, because I've talked to other people, and they said they knew who he was. And he said the same thing. He said, go to meetings and get connected with other people at these meetings. And this time I wanted it really bad. So I went to meetings, and then even though I felt uncomfortable at first, I just kept going. And CR was starting up in Hibbing around this time. My dad was actually going there. And my dad was not going there because he had issues. My dad was going there because he was trying to figure out how he could help me and Dan. That's who my dad is. If you know Paul Black, most of you know him. Actually, almost all of you know him. His main goal in life is celebrate recovery. He wants to see people healed because he's watched Dan, he's watched myself, he's watched hundreds of other people come through the program and just get completely changed. So went to the counselor, started going to CR, and little scripture here. Proverbs 27:17 says, when iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another. And to me, that should be like the sole verse for what CR stands for. Any of the meetings, what they stand for. When I came to CR, I didn't feel like I was a very sharp piece of iron. I don't know if anybody else did, but I came, and what I found was a lot of people that knew a lot more about staying sober than I did. I met a lot of people that knew how to live sober a lot better than I did. I had a lot of slip-ups in the beginning, like those medallions that were getting passed out tonight. Not to bring anyone down, but I had a ton of 30, 60, 90-day medallions before I finally started really getting it. It was all about the alcohol. I was justifying alcohol. I could still justify alcohol even later. That'll come up in a little bit here. The alcoholics, so I would say, oh, it's legal, I'm 21, it's not like insanely expensive, and you can still function off of it. But the thing was the alcohol still, it was trading one addiction for another. So I kept screwing up with alcohol, and I got a sponsor. His name was Jim Sturzinger. I asked him if I could use his name. He said yeah. And I remember one specific night, I had slipped up a number of times, and I called him at like 2 o'clock in the morning. And he comes out to where I was, and he meets me, and he's like, you got to start calling me before you drink the alcohol. I'm like, man, he's onto something. And he said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to do what they call the 90-90. Go to 90 meetings in 90 days. And I did that. I think it ended up being more like 120 in 90 days or so. And another thing he had me do was, he says, I want you to call me every day for 30 days. He goes, I don't really care what you say. Just tell me if you drank or not that day. He goes, that's all I want to know. And having that accountability really helped me get past that first hurdle. You know, that's just one person. You know, I really don't, I can't take credit for a ton of my recovery because there was so many people along the way that stepped in, especially from the very beginning. They saw that I wanted it and they helped me achieve it. My dad was one of them, my mom. So after doing all that, time started kind of flying, and before I knew it, I had 1 year clean. And after I had a year clean, well then instead of doing drugs and alcohol, then I started dating women. I had unhealthy relationships. My dad always told me, don't ever date a woman unless she's a believer, especially being a believer. You don't want to be unevenly yoked. It's in the Bible. And Dad gave me a lot of advice, and I didn't follow hardly any of it. So I dated these non-believers, struggling. I'm not saying they were bad people either. They weren't bad people. They weren't like just heathens, you know. They went to church with me. They just weren't really believers. The only reason they came to church is because I did, and it ended up being kind of more of a codependency type relationship, and it ended up being 2 failed relationships in about 3 years. And after the second one, I was like, man, I've had it. I wasn't the type of person to really date somebody just for fun. I mean, if I was dating, I had a long-term plan in mind. Phone's ringing. And after that second one, I'm like, you know what, I'm done. And I remember sitting on the back deck one day, and my dad came back there. He knew kind of what was going on. He didn't really meddle in our, I don't know what you call it, dating life? Sure. He didn't really meddle there too much, but he came out and he said, you know, if you really want a good girl, or if you're looking for a spouse, he said, start praying for one and be specific. And that's what I began to do. I began to just pray. First, the prayers started very simple, but very precise. Like God, first and foremost, give me a woman that serves you. Give me a woman that loves you. Give me a woman that has a heart for you. Once I got the big things out of the way, then I was saying, all right, I want one that can cook. I want one that likes to be clean. I want one that can hunt and fish and all that stuff. One that's not afraid to get dirty. And it didn't take very long. And the girl next door says, I want you to come over and meet somebody. And she had said this about 3 or 4 times. And I'm like, nah, I'll wait. God's going to send me a girl. I don't need to come over and meet that one. Well, after like the 3rd or 4th time she asked him, like, finally, I'll go over there, meet this girl. Well, I met her for the first time. I'm just like, whatever. Her feelings were the same towards me. You can even ask her. She's right there. She's the gal in the pink pants. And the second time I went to go and hang out with her was on Valentine's Day of 2010. And that second time I met her, I'm like, I'm going to marry this broad. And the second time I met her, we were hanging out down in her friend's basement, just sitting down there, and she goes, tell me your story. I'm like, oh, dang. The reason I was like, oh, dang, is because I kind of knew how she was. It was kind of like, I don't know, opposites. My wife has never drank. She's never smoked. She's never done a drug. She even goes like this when she swears. No, not that bad. No, it was just like, how did I end up meeting somebody this pure when I am so dirty, kind of thing, when our pasts are nothing alike, but as far as our personalities went, we were a lot alike. So when she asked me to tell her my story, I did, and I'm like, probably never going to see this one again. Well, instead, we ended up going fishing all the time. We ended up going hunting all the time. We just hung out almost all the time, spent a lot of our free time together. And after a little while, she became my best friend. And in October of 2011, she became my wife. This Friday, actually, we're going to be married for 11 years. And yeah, you can clap. She should get some kind of a 11-year medallion for putting up with me for 11 years. But and actually, when we met, I was in tech school again. I was in my 2nd year of electrical maintenance. So, I actually finished that time. Got the degree. Didn't do anything with it, but I got the degree. And right out of the school there, was another way that God was just working right off the bat. Because when I graduated tech school back then, there were no jobs on the Iron Range. I don't know if you guys remember 2000. It was like 2009, 2010. The Iron Range, the mines were all shut down basically. I think one of the mines was running at like half capacity or a quarter capacity. There were no jobs. And when I got out of school, I had a job. It wasn't a dream job, but I had a job within about a month. And I remember going to my instructors, just to tell them what was up, and get a letter to start applying at other places. But I had already had a job, but I was applying elsewhere just because. They're like, you and one other person actually found jobs. I'm like, that's what I call favor. So, my wife too, she was in school at the same time as me. She is a X-ray technician. So we graduated around the same time. We got our good jobs. She got her dream job up in Cook, Minnesota, where she always wanted to work, and I was making decent money, and we were living in a pretty nice house in Chisholm, and just living the American dream, I guess you could call it. I had 4 years of sobriety at this time. So we were married, had a good relationship with my family. People trusted me again, which was weird. No. But after a little while, I got kind of complacent. I was still going to meetings, not so much the other fellowships, but I was going to CR pretty regularly, mainly because I was the computer guy, like Jake's doing back there, so I had to go. It was almost like, and that was one thing I did in CR was I gave myself a reason to have to be there every night, especially in the beginning, because I could easily talk myself into not going to a meeting. Even if I couldn't go every night, if I went to CR, it was only once a week. That's a pretty easy commitment. But I made sure there was something I was doing there that I had to get there for. At the very beginning, I set up tables when Dean Weiland was there. Threw out tables with pamphlets. That was it. That was my job. It took 10 minutes to do, but somebody had to be there to do it, and that somebody was me. That's what got me there on Friday nights at that time. But after about 5 years or so, I kind of stopped. It wasn't all at once. It was slowly. Stopped going to the meetings. First I'd go, hit just the large group, then boogie out. Sometimes I'd pop in, leave halfway through the large group. And then I'd quit going altogether. And I don't even remember how it happened, but I just picked up the bottle one day after 5 years of sobriety and started drinking again. And when they say, that old saying in the other fellowships, you pick up where you left off when you stop and then start up again. And you do. The old feelings came right back. And I'm kind of an all-or-nothing type of guy when I drink. I never drank a couple beers. I never drank just a few mixes. I drank to get drunk. So I felt sick almost every time I drank the next day, especially. And I remember just having that feeling of failure after being, I think I went back to drinking probably 2 or 3 years or so. And the worst part of it was I had to hide it from my wife. Like I said, she never drank, and she did not approve of alcohol one bit because alcohol did some serious damage in her family, and she saw that. And so me drinking was a very big deal to her. I remember her even telling me at one point, she goes, "I did not marry you when you were drinking." That's how much it hurt her for me to go back to it. And I know her dad had some talks with her. I probably wouldn't be alive today if she didn't have those talks with her dad. But if I would have kept drinking, it would have led to divorce. That's all there was to it. It drove such a wedge in our relationship, and I had to hide it, like I said. But my wife is a lot like my mom. You're not going to hide stuff from her. I could drink a beer at 10 o'clock in the morning. My wife would get home from work at 6, and she'd still smell it on my breath. So there was no getting away with anything there. But like I said, I felt like I failed. And this one particular night, I was sitting around a fire, and we'll just say, I'm going to keep it short. I had a spiritual experience, and it was not a good one. I did not meet Jesus. I met some other things that were more of the demonic type. And that night, it scared the living daylights out of me. And that was in September. That was 8 years ago. The reason I wrote it down in a journal, it was in 2014 of Labor Day weekend. And the reason I wrote it down is that I never wanted to forget that day, and I never wanted to forget the feelings that I had that night. It was scary. It was really scary. But if you want to hear more about that, I'm glad to tell you, but I just don't want to get too deep into that one. So I've been sober for 8 years now. And that is that's the sobriety part of my testimony. That's all good, but this is the part that I love the most. I want to talk about my kids, my two sons. Jake, you want to put that picture up? Oh, it's kind of blurry. Can you see it okay? All right. Those are my two boys, Jeremiah and Wesley. So I'm going to back up a little bit when I talked about the high school girlfriend that I got pregnant and had moved away. During this whole spiel of using in and out, he was always in the back of my mind. I was a bad dad. I can admit that. I failed about the worst way that a dad can fail, by simply not being there for my oldest son. I basically shut the door when he was 6 or 7 years old. I signed my rights over as a father to let his stepfather adopt him. And it wasn't like, I did have some peace over the whole situation because I kind of knew the stepdad and I knew the grandparents of the stepdad. He was being raised in a good home. It was a Christian home. His grandparents were Christians. His mother was a Christian. His stepdad is a Christian. So he was being raised in a good home. It wasn't like it was a bad situation. And that's about the only thing that gave me peace. But as soon as I signed my rights over, I had regrets. For some reason, I had it in my head, like if I signed the rights over, the problem would go away. It actually made it worse. It made me feel like even a bigger failure as a dad. Because now, even if I wanted to pursue a relationship, I couldn't. Because I could end up in jail for it. And half the reason I signed it over is because he was so far away. Well, it wasn't too long after I signed over rights, I found out he moved back to Minnesota, over to Aurora, like an hour away. And when I found that out, man, it was like the inside of me was just crushed. I lost a lot of sleep over the whole situation. I prayed a lot. Just at night, I remember praying a lot, just like, God, let him know that I love him. Let him find it to forgive me. Hopefully he wants to see me someday. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. I didn't know at this point. But just let him know that he's not an accident. Let him know he's here for a reason. He wasn't an accident, I can say that. I was having unprotected sex. If you're having unprotected sex, it's not an accident. If you're having protected sex, it's not an accident, If you're having sex, period, it's not an accident. And CR prayed. My wife was praying. My parents were praying. So there was a lot of people praying. And about 2 years ago on it was like late spring, I want to say it was a little after opening of fishing, a buddy of mine went out crappie fishing, so we were out pretty late. We were fishing into the night. No, it wasn't Marcus, wherever he is. It was a different friend. I was cheating on you. I have another fishing friend. I got home pretty late, and my wife goes, Jeremiah called. And I remember I was unhooking the boat. I just kind of stopped, looked, like I was in shock. I'm like, oh man. Like I didn't really know what to do. And so I remember unpacking the boat, got a sink full of fish to flay, so I'm there kind of taking my time, and I'm just like role-playing in my head how this conversation's going to go. I'm like, well, it's either going to go really, really bad or it's going to go really, really good. And I didn't know what to expect, and of course I was kind of thinking toward the worst. Like, how is this conversation going to start? How is it going to end? So, that phone felt like it weighed about 10 pounds. Called him up. Hey. And we talked on the phone for like 3 hours like we were best buds, like we'd never been apart. Talked like he was just another friend, telling me about his life. I'm telling him about my life. I'm telling him about his little brother. Telling him about the whole situation, and told him about how I never thought he'd be able to forgive me. And when he said the words, I forgave you a long time ago, it was like some of the biggest weights that fell off my shoulders that evening. I remember going out to my deck after I got off the phone with him and just sobbing, thanking God, because it was 16 years. He was 16 years old when I met him, when I first really got to meet him and know him. That's a long time. So basically, I missed out on the first 16 years of his life. And we don't have the relationship that a normal father and son have, but I'm very grateful for what we do have. He calls me when he needs help. He calls me when he's in trouble sometimes. But what I have now That's an answer to prayer. And it wasn't just my prayer. It was everybody's prayer. I wasn't there, but yes, years, that's exactly right. When I was doing my testimony in Hibbing, I was like trying to imitate Marcus, because when we were up at Labor Day weekend, and Marcus, it didn't click with him on who Jeremiah was. And when Marcus found out who, my dad said it was awesome. He's like, once Marcus figured out who Jeremiah was, he went nuts, I guess. Are you kidding me? You know how many years we prayed for you? I remember, and we're sitting around the fire, or sitting in the chairs, and my son's up there cooking burgers. He's like, dude, that's your son. I'm like, I know. Still can't get over it. Years of prayer. So that's the Jeremiah story. And then there's the little fella. This is about a year ago, year and a handful of months ago. So the little guy in the middle, he's bigger than that now. Well, the one on the left is bigger too. I don't know what happened, but he grew like another 2 inches. I'm 6'2", and I think he's about 6'5". But Wesley, the Wesley story. So Anna and I were married for a few years. Actually, I think it was more like 5 or 6. And we didn't want kids right away when we got married. That was an agreement we had. We wanted kids, we just didn't want them right away. We wanted to actually take vacations together, go have fun together. We were both kind of, I guess you'd say, free spirits. Anna always went and did horse stuff. I always went out fishing. And we did a lot of the same stuff together, too. I'd go riding with her. She'd come fishing with me. But we were always off doing something, taking off. Well, we had seen quite a few places, you know, been to Hawaii a handful of times and went on some nice vacations. And life was getting kind of like, all right, maybe it's time. So we both decided we were going to try to start a family. Thought it would be easy. It wasn't as easy as we thought. Now, I'm not a doctor. I don't know technical terms, but all I know is that she had stuff going on that made it difficult to conceive. And it was frustrating. We tried for the better part of 2 years and saw zero success. And I can be honest with you guys, I lost hope completely. I'm like, and she was wanting me to go and get tested and whatnot. I'm like, come on, man. I had one without even trying. It ain't me. But it was a tough 2 years, and it was hard for me because I knew it really bugged her. As, you know, she's thinking she failed. And to me, it didn't, I don't want to say it didn't matter, but it didn't matter. I could have went either way at this point with having kids or not having kids. If we have a kid, great, but if we don't, life is still going to be fun. I got a ton of nieces and nephews. That's not the same, but it's still fun. But I lost hope. I was done. I'm like, yeah, this ain't happening. Anna didn't lose hope. Anna was reaching out to other places online. She was getting things sent, just uplifting scriptures and whatnot, and she'd have them laying on the table, laying on the counter. And I remember I'd glance at them and be like, yeah, I don't know if that's going to work or not. So I basically gave up praying about having a kid. We were 2 years into it. Prayer was stagnant, but she didn't give up. But Genesis 2:24 tells us that when a man leaves his father and is joined to his wife, they become one flesh. So even when my prayers were tired, my faith was tired, hers wasn't. Her prayers were my prayers, even though I wasn't in it. We were in agreement, even though my prayers weren't even being thrown out anymore. And I remember getting home one specific day after work. I come up the stairs, and Anna's just sitting there. She has this kind of like little smirk on her face. And I'm like, something was just weird, like the feeling when you walked in. It was like, something's going on here. And she's like, so I took a test today. She comes walking over and hands me the stick. I hope I grabbed the right end, not the end she peed on. No. And I'm looking at it. She's like, I took a test today. And again, it was kind of like when she told me that Jeremiah called. I'm just looking at it like, no, not like that, but just kind of in awe. And she's hugging me, and I'm like, man. So when Trish asked me if there was anything specific I wanted, I said, put this picture up. Because to me, when I think about prayer, if any of you ever doubt that prayers get answered, like Marcus said, years of prayer. Every single person in this picture is an answer to prayer. Not just my prayer, but everybody's prayer. Starting with my wife. I prayed for her, she prayed for me. My mom and dad, everybody prayed for me. And those two little fellas, well, that little fella and the big fella, were answers to a lot of prayers. So that is really all I have. Life is good. I'll pass.
Amen. Good story. All right, we're going to cut things a little short. We're going to go into break. Try to keep it about 5 minutes tonight. Get downstairs as soon as we can. And women up here, we can have small groups.